Welcome and thank you everyone for joining us for today's virtual town hall. My name is Laura Masenka and I am the Deputy Director of Events here at Philabundance. Today we have a very special interview with Philabundance CEO Loree Jones as she reflects on her first 6 months and the experience of taking on her new role in the middle of a pandemic crisis and amidst the ongoing national social justice movement. As America's poorest big city, Philadelphia has long grappled with the root causes of poverty. Underfunded schools, lack of affordable housing and healthcare, and a lack of the most basic need, access to nutritious food. The COVID-19 global pandemic has heavily impacted the greater Philadelphia area and further increased food insecurity across Philabundance's 9-county service area. Prior to the pandemic, Philabundance served 90,000 people each week who were at risk of hunger, 30% of whom were children and 16% were seniors. Philabundance partner agencies are now reporting up to a 60% increase in the need for food, with 40% of people accessing the charitable food network for the first time. In today's conversation with Jenice Armstrong of the Philadelphia Inquirer, Loree will discuss the reality of joining a hunger relief organization during a time of such great need, what her team has learned along the way, and some of our successes and challenges. Loree will also share insight into her vision for Philabundance as she leads the staff to meet the continued challenge of the pandemic and a downward economy. Recently, Loree actually joined CNN anchor Jake Tapper for a look at the current state of hunger. So I'd like to play this clip so we have a quick synopsis of the issue before we get started.
According to the hunger relief group Feeding America, some 54 million Americans will soon be food insecure, meaning they will miss meals due to lack of access to food regularly. Just this one charity reports a 60% rise in food assistance since the pandemic started. Let's bring in Loree Jones. She's CEO of Philabundance. It's a member of Feeding America in the great region of Philadelphia. Loree, how severe is the need for food in Philly? Do your figures compare to what Feeding America is seeing nationally? Just a significant increase in how many people need your help?
Absolutely, and thanks for having us on, Jake, to raise awareness about this important issue. We're seeing at Philabundance in our 9-county service area in southeastern Pennsylvania and South Jersey an up to 60% increase. And what is also alarming is that 40% of the people who are accessing the charitable food network now are accessing it for the first time. These are brand new Americans, our neighbors, all of a sudden finding themselves unable to put food on the table.
And we often see the lines in news reports like this one, but you're hearing the stories, you're meeting the people. What are the most common types of cases that you're hearing from families every day?
I'll share something that someone shared with me confidentially. A business owner that I've patronized for years emailed me last week and said, knowing where I work, she said, how can I find food? She and her husband are entrepreneurs. And for years, they've contributed to the economy. And for the first time in their lives, they have to ask for a handout. I'll also share with you that just this week, as we were waiting for snow, expecting snow, it is 32 degrees outside. I was in Camden, New Jersey, at Touch, New Jersey, where there was a line around the corner 2 hours before the lines opened up. And so the reality is that so many people in our communities are for the first time finding themselves in this really tough position of needing a handout in this way.
Camden, New Jersey, just across the river from Philadelphia. We're 1 week away from Christmas. Do you have what you need to help all the families coming to you needing help to make ends meet?
You know, the community has been incredibly supportive. Feeding America, food banks, Philabundance, we've seen an outpouring of support. More and more people than ever are donating. We see kids donating $5 from their piggy banks, people signing over their stimulus checks. But the reality is, to meet this need, we need more help. And so we're encouraging people to give what they can, give $1 if you can, give 10 if you can, so that we can make sure that we help people put food on the table, especially this particular year and especially at the holidays.
Are things going to get more desperate, do you anticipate, as we get deeper into winter?
We're concerned that it will. We have distributed in the last year about 50 million pounds of food as a result of COVID, twice what we normally did. And we believe we're on track to do the same this coming year. With unemployment the way it is, we're trying to see what's going to happen in Congress to see if more help is going to come for both food banks as well as for everyday citizens. Without that kind of help, we're really worried that we're not going to be able to meet this growing need.
The problem of hunger in America is year-round, and it's always a problem. It's a shame. It's an absolute tragedy, and frankly, a disgrace. But now you have the pandemic and the economic problems because of the pandemic. Has the demand this year put such a strain that you're not able to even provide for the people who are normally struggling?
It has been incredibly difficult for food banks like ours across the country to keep up with the need. And the reality is we're only scratching the surface. It's why we ask people to definitely support us, but we also advocate. We call for increases to SNAP. We realize that we can't do it alone. We have to partner with government and with other agencies to begin to meet the need that people have.
And how has coronavirus changed the way you conduct operations to try to feed so many families? Obviously, you can't have the kind of face-to-face interaction and have volunteers come in the way you probably were able to in the past.
Absolutely. We've had to change dramatically how we operate. Initially, when COVID first started, we shut down our operation to volunteers. We now are able to have volunteers in our warehouses helping us sort and pack food, but we have fewer volunteers there. We're making sure we're doing it safely. We take temperatures of everybody who comes into any of our buildings. We have COVID waivers. We encourage social distancing. We have masks. We have gloves. Everything we can. We do everything we can do to keep our staff and volunteers safe. But it's made it harder. We've had increased expenses for additional cleaning and PPE. We've also provided that for not just our folks, but also for the 350 agencies that we work with and through in the Philadelphia area.
Okay, and joining Loree today, we have a very special guest, Jenice Armstrong. So I'd like to quickly introduce her and then we'll get started. Jenice is a newspaper metro columnist and journalist with more than 25 years of experience, writing for such publications as the Philadelphia Inquirer and Daily News, the Washington Post, the Associated Press, and the Rochester Times-Union. Armstrong graduated from Howard University, where she majored in print journalism and edited the school newspaper. Since arriving in Philadelphia in 1991, Armstrong has held a variety of roles, first covering topics including banking in the city's hospitality and gaming industries, and later moving on to head the paper's business department and work as an assistant city editor and write for the features department. These days, her focus is on local and regional news. Her commentary covers everything from City Hall to crime. She's known for her blunt honesty and bravery in speaking out against social injustice, and that's just one of the many reasons why we're excited to have her here with us today. And so with that, I will turn things over to Jenice and Loree to get started.
All right. Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you so much for that great introduction. I'm excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. First of all, I want to say, Loree, congratulations. Congratulations on this new opportunity. And I want to ask you, you started June 6th, right when, everything was going on with the pandemic. We had all the social unrest with Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and plus, hundreds in this area dying from the coronavirus and growing unemployment, which of course meant more people going hungry. And there you were, taking over at the helm of Philabundance. Can you describe for us what that experience was like?
Absolutely. And I just have to say, I'm absolutely delighted to have a chance to talk with you. And thank you so much for participating in this. I have been a fan of your work and read your columns to be challenged as well as to learn. So we're really delighted you're partnering with us in this particular way. Yes, I started at a unique moment in time in our history. And I have to say what I felt at that moment, and I still feel, I felt honored, I felt privileged, I feel gratitude. I am deeply honored and privileged to have an opportunity to lead this organization with its incredible reputation and history, with our founder still involved, Pamela Lawler, and to be able to do it where we're serving people and meeting the most basic need at this critical time. So I definitely felt honored and privileged. But as you said, a lot was going on in the city, in the region, and in the world. And I'll share with you that week, there was unrest, and one of our properties, the Burke's Warehouse over at 4th and Burke's, we had it looked like some people were trying to breach it. So we had some kind of damage to the windows and to the gate. So we had just boarded up the facility. So I think on my second day, I went over to meet my new team and put eyes on to make sure they were okay. And so we were closing early, doing various things to make sure that they and we were all safe. And so I met them and said, hey, we're kind of closing down early. We're kind of boarding up, making sure you guys are safe. And you know what they said to me? Could you please stop making us close early? So that's what I started. That's the organization that I joined, a team of people who are so dedicated, who realize that the work that they and we do every day is absolutely needed. And they are dedicated and motivated. Despite what's happening in the world, they are committed to making sure that we are working to provide food to people who need it.
Oh, I love that. I love that anecdote. You know, one of my colleagues had written that when, you know, at the height of everything, and I guess we're still having even, who knows where we are in this whole pandemic with all the new variants coming, but some volunteers weren't showing up. They had concerns about their own health, and some, you know, a lot of places were understaffed. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And I'll take this opportunity to talk about the incredible team that I joined and the people that were leading it before I got here. So think about this. In mid-March, when we were still figuring out and just learning how to say coronavirus, this team was here figuring it out, getting CDC guidelines and determining, you know, early on we weren't wearing masks. Then we were learning about social distancing. And we work through and with 350 agencies across this region. And about 70 of them had shut down because they had seniors that were volunteers and for various reasons weren't able to come in. And so this team adjusted, made sure that we were connecting with additional agencies or the ones that were still open, providing them with more food to distribute to make sure everyday folks got access to that food. What the team also did was made sure we provided those agencies with all the support they needed. So PPE, making sure that they had the protective personal equipment so that they could operate safely. Making sure that if they needed to store food for a little bit longer because things were changing, that we provided them with the funding for refrigerators, freezers, refrigerated vans. And so what Philabundance really did was invest in and double down on working directly with our agency partners. We also helped them recruit volunteers. One of my first kind of volunteer activities here was doing senior home delivery through one of our agencies because they were having trouble finding volunteers to do that. And then with our own volunteers, we did reduce the number of volunteers that we had, largely because, again, social distancing, CDC guidelines. So instead of having 20, 25 folks a shift, we've reduced that down to about 10 or 12. Interestingly, and I have to say this about people in our region who are so caring and so generous, it's been hard to find slots for volunteers. Volunteers are in fact signing up. So since that time, we have an overwhelming number of people who are volunteering and volunteering repeatedly to help us in our warehouses.
Do you need more volunteers?
We always need more volunteers and encourage people to visit philabundance.org to sign up for a slot. We have volunteers that we do usually 2 shifts a day during the week. And then on 2 special days, on Tuesday mornings and Friday mornings, we operate something called a hub. And we always have about a handful of volunteers that are working there. So definitely encourage people to join us.
Okay. You know, so there you were dealing with all this, and then you get hacked. I mean, oh my gosh. Walk us through exactly what happened, how you discovered it, and remind us again how much was stolen.
Yeah, it was definitely a trying time. And over the course of my career in various roles working in government and nonprofits, I definitely have experienced some really challenging times. And this is up there as one of the worst. And what we discovered is that through a complicated scheme of phishing and hacking and spoofing and wire fraud, we were defrauded out of $900,000, which is, you know, a huge amount of money and is absolutely troubling. And people often ask me how I felt. I felt outraged. I felt everything any victim of a crime would feel. But I also realized that the people that should feel shame about it are those evil criminals, criminals who did this to us. So discovered that this happened and quickly contacted law enforcement, contacted the banks that were involved, of course, and also working with leaders on our team and our board, identified a group of folks to help us with an internal investigation. And what's great, again, people in this region so care about us. We had a top-notch group of investigators, lawyers, forensic accountants that are kind of with internationally known entities that came in to help us conduct an investigation.
Well, that's great, because that's really low. Stealing from an organization like Philabundance, that's the lowest of the low. Yes. In the aftermath of all of that, what kind of cybersecurity precautions did you put in place, and can you talk about it?
Yeah, I can talk about some of them.
All right, well, tell us, give us an idea.
I don't want to give people a roadmap, I've been told. But so we did a lot of things on both the IT security side, but also the financial control side. So you can imagine early on, initially kind of doing everything from lowering the threshold of what payments were approved and who approved them and what I needed to see and what the board needed to see, did all of that. But we also brought in, again, outside experts, cybersecurity experts to help us review what we already had in place and help us develop a plan for what we would do going forward. And so these cybersecurity experts, came in virtually, did tests for us over the weekends. We developed with them a longer term plan. One of the things that came through was this was really about developing a culture where everybody in the organization was taking responsibility. Everybody in the organization was being vigilant. So chances are in your companies and your organizations, for all the people that are watching, periodically there are phishing tests. So your IT department's probably kind of testing you every now and then to see we're doing those kinds of things. And we're doing ongoing training, not kind of the full 2 hours, 2-week training, kind of in bits and pieces to make sure that it sticks. So we definitely have upped our IT security from every angle and also financial controls.
Yes, that's great. Now, what kind of impact did losing nearly $1 million have on Philabundance ability to feed people?
Fortunately, not a huge amount. It sounds odd to say that, right? But I keep referring to the fact, and I think we have many of our supporters on this call. People have been so supportive of us and so generous that we were able to continue to purchase the food that we needed. And I'll tell you in a minute how much more we had to purchase. But we also, I credit the board and the leadership of this organization who for years made sure that we had reserves, as any solid organization, nonprofit, for-profit would have. We had a contingency for the project we were working on. So we were able to frankly not miss a beat and we're able to still purchase food. And to tell you the numbers, so this happened in July, and I think we had budgeted to spend about $120,000 a month on food, kind of pre-COVID. We were spending, Jenice, over $500,000 a month on food, so over $500,000 a month on food. And in July in particular, I think that number actually went up to 600,000, 700,000 for that month. And so fortunately, because we were in a strong position financially, we had reserves, had contingencies, we weren't able, those criminals didn't stop us from feeding people.
That's great. That's great. Did you, besides the cybersecurity precautions that you put in place, was there anything else that you and your team learned from the incident?
Yeah, I think I think everybody has learned the importance of cybersecurity and financial controls. So I think there are these basic things that we're supposed to do all the time. So periodically, everywhere you are, they say, oh, you should change your password. You should have certain kinds of controls in place, or you should really think before you click on this link. If something's from outside, you see that note that says, let me look at it, but really being more careful. And I think one of the things we've all learned is the impact when you don't do those basic things. So I think we learned to kind of return to the basics with basic IT controls and basic financial controls. That definitely was a takeaway for me and a takeaway, I think, for our team.
We've talked about this before, but I don't think you can talk too much about the situation as it stands in terms of hunger and food insecurity in this region. I mean, sometimes it's even hard to wrap your head around, but it's real. Can you help us understand just how bad the situation is right now?
Absolutely. We always, for years, we talked about the dubious distinction that Philadelphia, let's say, as a city has as being the poorest big city. And then we knew that kind of by 2019, things were kind of on the upswing. We were doing a little bit better. But if you think about this, back in 2018, in our region, and I'll remind folks that we are in southeastern Pennsylvania and South Jersey. So for that 9-county region, in 2018, there were about 635,000 people who were food insecure. That's 635,000 people who on a daily, weekly basis were making that tough decision. Am I going to pay for rent or am I going to pay for food? Am I going to pay for medicine for my kid or am I going to buy a healthy meal? 635,000 people. What we saw with COVID and the economic crisis is that by the end of 2020, that number jumped to nearly 900,000. So we talk about percentages, 60% here, 40% there, but think about it. 900,000 people in our region are having a tough time paying for food.
I'm just wrapping my head around. That's almost 1 million people, because of the people imagine the ones you don't know about.
And that's the thing, and I mentioned that story to CNN, on CNN. Chances are everybody who's watching, in the same way that everybody at this point knows somebody who has been hospitalized with COVID or sadly has died from COVID. Like it's kind of closing in. I dare say the same is true of hunger. I promise you that somebody in your network has had to make those tough choices. I told the story about someone that I know who reached out, and it was tough, I believe, for her to reach out and kind of ask for help in that way. My team knows that kind of early on, I think it was late June, early July, we had just stopped doing those Friday distributions at Citizens Bank Park. And somebody came in. I could, see him like by his accent and what he looked like. Chances are he was from South Philly, probably grew up a few blocks from here. Working class guy who came in and said, you know what, I lost my job. I'm unemployed. I don't know how to feed my family. Now, we usually don't distribute food here at Galloway where I am. We usually give it out, but we kind of gathered up what we had and shared it with him. And, it was striking to me that here's somebody who I am so sure every day in his life had a family that worked hard to put food on the table. He was working hard to put food on the table. And for the first time he couldn't. Like, what did that mean? What did that feel like for him?
Rock bottom.
Yeah.
Rock bottom. You're doing God's work. Hey, you had a special visitor recently. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We absolutely did. How incredible was it that now President Biden and Dr. Biden and their family chose Philabundance to come to. And we now know why, right? So if you saw in the last few days, you've seen that he's issued some executive orders, and I think there's legislation coming to really address food insecurity. And frankly, he told us he was going to do that while he was here. So both he and the now vice president chose food banks to volunteer on King Day of Service. And King Day of Service means a lot to all of us here. King is a personal inspiration of mine. We like to say everybody can be great because everybody can serve. And that Dr. Biden, that President Biden, that their daughter, that Vice President Harris down in DC decided to come and join our volunteers and really highlight the issue was incredibly important to us. It definitely was an honor.
Yeah, how exciting. What are your predictions for what will happen the next 6 months as it relates to food insecurity and hunger hunger relief in our region? What are your predictions?
So they're pretty somber predictions, I have to say. So in the fall, what we were seeing here and what our partners at Feeding America were seeing is that it's probably going to take about 2 years for us to come through this recovery. And so we were already planning to purchase more food. We've actually rented additional warehouse space to make sure that we can meet this increasing need that we've seen. Now, there has been a little bit of hope with the vaccine, but as a member of my team says, while there's a vaccine against COVID, there's no vaccine against hunger. And so the reality is we are still preparing we're in this for the long haul. Now, we are hoping with what's going to happen in DC, that there is going to be some additional support for food banks and for everyday citizens through this new legislation, new executive orders. But the reality is, Jenice, we're thinking that we need to continue to purchase more food to distribute it. And I should say, and one of the things our team has been reporting on just this week, it's actually going to be harder for us to do that. So I'll take you back a minute to March of last year and what my experience as an everyday citizen was back then. I'd go to the grocery store and it was harder to find things. Things were more expensive, right? So if I found like just basic things like rice, it would cost more. Well, that was the experience that we had at food banks. And that's why, as I mentioned earlier, we were spending so much more on food. Well, the reality is we're in another one of those cycles now where it's harder and harder to find produce and dry goods. It's everything from, it's this perfect storm, everything from weather conditions in California to import and export issues, labor issues related to COVID, an aluminum can shortage, just a host of things is making it more difficult for us to access food that we need. So in addition to seeing this increased need kind of stay up here, we also are finding it harder and harder to find food. So we'll end up having to spend more money and think more creatively about how we do that. Wow.
How do you describe your management style and how do you keep from feeling overwhelmed at what you're facing?
Yeah. I would say collaborative. Anything I've been a part of as a volunteer board member, as an employee, even my personal life, has been successful if it's been a partnership. And one of the things we say here, we have a value, one of our values is collaboration. We can't do it alone. And so I always find that if you get a variety of voices and perspectives around a table, mostly virtual now, that you're able to really solve a problem creatively and more effectively. And I like to bring that to the work that I do. In terms of what inspires me and how I keep motivated, I think about the people we serve. I think about the people we serve and the people I get to serve with. And so there are moments like everybody else, particularly at this time, that I'm feeling down, pressure, stress. It's a challenging world that we're living in right now. But I think about, while it's difficult, how much harder it is for the people that we serve. And that's one of the things that keeps me going. And then I told you the story, my first week, my team is just like, Loree, we don't want to shut down early. We want to do more. We want to work. And so that definitely gets me energized because I get to work along people who are doing it because they care and have heart.
I was going to ask you next, how do you keep your team motivated? It sounds like they were motivated before you even got there.
They really were. But the reality is, I think if you talk to anybody in nonprofit and for-profit, I've talked to a lot of leaders over the last several months, and everybody is dealing with these challenges. How do you make sure that your team stays connected, engaged? How do you support their wellness? And so, Big companies are doing it, small nonprofits are figuring that out. And so we have made a commitment to do that. I'll share with you, because everybody who's talked to me about Philabundance and my work here knows this. And I said this to our great board chair, my first conversation with him about joining this team. I said, one of my highest priorities is going to be investing in our team. I want Philabundance to win awards for best workplace. I think my team's sick of me saying that. I believe you have to invest in your people in order to do the work that we do. And so we've done that in very intentional and tangible ways, including we are carving out time once a month for an employee engagement day. We had our first one this month. I'm excited about that. And we're able to say, kind of, here are the basics about stress. Here's the benefits about EAP, Employee Assistance Program, and here's how you find counseling. We also, of course, did a training on financial controls and IT, because that's critically important to us. And so one of the ways I hope that I'm motivating the team is really providing them with the resources they need. It's financial and the kind of tools we need, but also providing them with those other supports so that when they show up, they can show up whole and support the people that we serve.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about you and your background. I understand you're a Spelman grad. Tell us a little bit about your journey from Spelman University. Were you there when Stacey Abrams was there?
I wasn't. She started right after I graduated. But yeah, so I'm from the area. I'm a Girls High girl. I went to Spelman. I went to graduate school at Princeton, and then I had the opportunity to work in government here in Philadelphia. And work in nonprofits and higher ed over the course of my career.
That's where we got to know each other, right? And
That's
you
right.
were working
That's
with
right.
Mayor Street.
That's right. I got a chance to work with Mayor Street.
And tell our listeners what your title was with Mayor Street. It was a pretty high up one, wasn't it?
I ended up serving as managing director of the city, which is a great honor. And I also served in another cabinet position, head of external affairs. So yes, I've worked in and around public service, and I think that I can point to a family of educators. I can point to Girls High and its commitment to service, Spelman and its commitment to developing leaders who are committed to changing the world, as well as just kind of mentors and friends of mine, as like this commitment and this connection to service. And so it is, to me, fitting at this moment, and it feels like a calling to be able to use all of those experiences and bring it to bear at Philabundance on such a critical issue at such a critical time.
Mm-hmm. And most recently, you were at Rutgers, right?
That's right. That's right.
Talk a little bit about what you did at Rutgers.
Yeah, so I served for about 5.5 years as chief of staff for Rutgers Camden. And because all things are connected, I believe in my world, while I was there, Rutgers Camden started a food pantry. And Philabundance helped Rutgers Camden start that food pantry. And I also, at that time in that role, was invited to serve on the board of an entity, the Hope Center, which is at Temple University, which is the organization that's helping to remind people that college students are everyday students with everyday challenges, meaning that college students are food insecure and are housing insecure, and is trying to raise awareness about that. So yeah, I got to work at Rutgers Camden, a great place, and work in the city of Camden and learn a lot about their challenges there, and stay very much connected to those people today.
Mm-hmm. What do some of the people listening now need to know about Philabundance and the challenges it faces in these months ahead?
Yeah, I wouldn't be a good leader of a nonprofit if I didn't say that while people have been incredibly generous, there's going to be an ongoing need for financial support. And that really does provide us with the flexibility and the ability and the resources that we need to support folks. And so I definitely encourage people to support us, because, as I said, it's going to cost us more to purchase food, just more and more challenges there. The other thing I think it's important to know, and I guess you got through this conversation without sharing it, is about the entirety of the work that we do. Right now, what's on the front page is what people are seeing is what we call the relief hunger now, or feeding the line. So making sure that people right now have access to a fresh, healthy meal, because so many people are economically challenged right now. But the other part of the work, and frankly, among us, one of the main reasons I came here is our other work, shortening the line or ending hunger for good. So for 20 years, a hallmark of that at Philabundance has been, we've run a culinary arts training program called Philabundance Community Kitchen, or PCK, helping to transform lives there with life coaches, as well as providing culinary arts skills and helping people get jobs in those fields. But we also are working with other organizations. Over the course of my career, I've been able to serve on boards of nonprofits and foundations, and really try to address the root causes of poverty and encourage organizations to work together. And Philabundance is doing that through our Ending Hunger for Good work. So I would encourage people watching to look into that work that we're doing, both here and across the country through Feeding America.
And also, are individuals really stepping up to help Philabundance?
Absolutely, in incredible ways. So one is like volunteers. I talked about volunteers that show up here every day. We also have kind of like pro bono volunteers or skilled volunteers. And so folks are always offering to help us figure things out here in project management and planning. And so that's great. People have been generous. I mean, I do love the story that we have a wall in here where we have notes, and there's like kids, and you can tell kids wrote it. My sister and I think it's sad that people are hungry, and so we're sending in $5 from our piggy bank. People have signed over their stimulus checks to us. So people are stepping up in small and large ways to provide financial support, but moral support, and then also to make sure that we have kind of all the skills we need.
So are donations up? Excuse me for interrupting.
Donations, yes, donations actually are up. And so what we're seeing here, and we're seeing across the country through Feeding America, is that people have stepped up in incredible ways. And so we're actually doing better with fundraising than we had in years past. But I want to make sure people understand that also means we're trying to still reach and address this larger need. So every dollar is needed because we're having to purchase more food, engage more staff, work with our partners, purchase more infrastructure supports for our partners. So yes, donations are up, thankfully. And
Up a little bit, a lot.
They're up.
A lot.
Yeah, donations are definitely up a lot. They're definitely up a lot. But they're definitely up a lot. So if we had to quadruple in the last fiscal year what we're spending on food per month, we have not quadrupled the financial increase of fundraising, but definitely there has been an increase, which has been great.
Okay, I have a question in the chat. Let's see.
Okay.
Hunger is not an isolated problem. It can lead to this whole host of other challenges, complicating education and other health issues, mental well-being. Can you talk a little bit about that, about hunger?
Absolutely. And that's definitely what research is showing us. I just touched briefly on ending hunger for good, but that's a part of the work that we're working on there. Definitely hunger, it contributes, it's one of the social determinants of health. And so we are partnering with healthcare agencies, health insurance companies, with nonprofit social service agencies to address that. And the reality is that even the stress that comes with making those tough decisions about how to feed your family or having trouble feeding your family, then you get into the cycle where it has a negative impact on your health. Also with respect to children and hunger, that if children aren't getting the proper nutrition early on, that's going to have a negative impact on their ability to learn today, but also can have a lasting impact on their development. So definitely there's a health impact, a longer lasting health impact beyond just people being hungry on a given day. And so as I said, we are partnering with organizations and agencies to address those root causes and really looking at how the health and the food that we bring to the table impacts health and the rest of folks' lives.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, here's another question. And it is, following up on the cyber attack, I'm concerned in that I read that your account was hacked and you lost $1 million. Does this mean that there may be a possibility your donors' accounts could have also been hacked? Is that a possibility?
Glad you asked that question. Our donor database was not impacted, was not ever impacted as part of this. And also our employee information was never impacted by this. So this was discrete. And again, we were able to have experts from outside come in and support us with this we called it an internal investigation. We're actually outside experts that did that in addition to the FBI and the police getting involved. But our donor information was never impacted and our employee data information was never impacted. So I guess if there's a silver lining, that's at least good. But yeah, how terrible that was, and that we were the victims of that crime.
Yeah. Okay, here's another question. Let's see. And it is this, I may have missed it, she says. I was not on the call in the beginning, but how are Philabundance and Feeding America connected?
Absolutely. Feeding America is a member organization. We are a member of Feeding America. They have 200 food banks like ours across the country that are all a part of Feeding America. And on King Day, when we were hosting the Bidens, we also hosted the Feeding America CEO, Claire Babineau-Fontenot. She was here for the day with us as well. Encourage you to do some research on her, read a little bit about her. There was a New York Times piece where she had like 100 siblings. You have to read about it, read her story. She's an inspiring figure and is doing great things to raise awareness, not just here locally, but really across the globe. And it's great that we're a partner because we also get through that membership additional resources. So they're able to provide additional back office support for us. Large grants that come through from, like, I think Jeff Bezos of Amazon fame gave a large grant to Feeding America last spring, around March or so. Some of that funding was able to come to us. So yeah, we're a member of the Feeding America network.
Okay. Are there other needs we should be trying to address besides hunger with the infrastructure you are building?
Absolutely. So you think about this, if we're working through 350 agencies. So chances are a couple blocks from where you live, there is some agency that's providing food to folks. And so there are opportunities when you're connecting with people in that way to provide them other resources. So let's say last year there was an election, and so voter registration information. So we are bipartisan, vote for who you want, but we want to make sure people know about the election. So there was a way we often, to our agency partners, could provide information, say, in boxes of food. Similarly with the census, we know that for the state of Pennsylvania, it was important, or actually for all states, it's important for people to be counted because that's how resources flow into a state. And so we were able to use those outlets to get people information like that. So one of the things we're able to do, since we're kind of through our agency partners really touching everyday citizens, is making them aware of programs, resources, and the like.
Okay. How do you partner with the school district since the impact of hunger on children can last for a very long time?
Yeah, another great question. And school districts, they're great partners of ours as well. And particularly during COVID, one of the things I'll share, I'm sure this has been kind of announced widely, we were talking to them about their food distribution. And so one of the things is, during COVID, a few things were happening, and the school district set up some sites. I think it started with 60, they went up to about 100 sites where families could come and pick up food. You think about it, because normally kids were getting food during the school day, and they're not anymore. So we partnered with them to see if we could help them promote those to make sure that people were taking advantage of them. We also worked with and through schools over the years for a program called Backpack. So that's a program where it's not literally a backpack that we give, but we give kids about the equivalent of about 24 meals that they can take home over a weekend. And that distribution tends to happen under COVID through schools. Now that's just happening near schools. So definitely over the years, we've partnered with the school district of Philadelphia, and frankly, with school districts around the region.
Are people really taking advantage of the school lunches, being able to pick those up, or are they just like foregoing them? What's the situation?
It's actually been a mix. And we know that from what we're hearing, not just about Philadelphia, but also some of the suburban counties that we serve in. And in some cases, we know that parents are picking up the food. In some cases, they're not. And so actually one of the ongoing projects we have is partnering with folks both in the city of Philadelphia and out in Montgomery County to see what we can do to help them increase the number of people that are accessing that food.
One of the things I wonder about, and when I see on television the little kids going to pick up their lunches, is there a stigma associated with that process?
That's a great question. And, one of the things in definitely a district like Philadelphia, and I think it's the same for in the city of Camden, 100%, they basically have 100% free school lunch. Just know this from a past job that I had, 2 past jobs, I should say. And so there, at least everybody can access free school lunches. But yeah, there's this issue and this concern, particularly during COVID, when people have to come pick it up, is there some, issue around dignity? One of the things that benefits of our programs is that we are able to provide food generally without people having to show ID and the rest. And something I'll just share, which I thought was interesting, that we're not directly doing, but I heard last couple of months that I really loved. I was talking on a radio show, and one of the interviewers was talking about his church. And he said that his church, and they're likely one of our food pantries, but they had additional food distributions, and they were doing one that coming Saturday. And he said, what his pastor's been saying to people is, come pick up the food. You can pick it up for one of your neighbors, right? So what's that message? I love that, right? So you're picking it up. It's either for you or for your neighbor. And the reality is, and I think we all probably know people who do this. I know that in my own family, my mother, her friends are doing this. They do collections every month, and people go and pick up food, or they purchase it and they give it out to people in their communities of need. So there are definitely creative ways of really addressing that stigma. But the reality is, for us, we have a commitment to dignity and commitment to serve in a dignified way. I keep mentioning we work through and with 350 partner agencies, and they're members of ours. Under COVID, we've waived all membership fees, of course, but there's a commitment that they make, and it's about making sure that they're serving food safely, they're safe, serve safe certifications to make sure that they're handling food safely. But there's also a commitment they make in terms of how they serve and not having barriers for people. And so one of the things we try to like monitor and encourage is that people really are being served in a really dignified way.
I think that's important. Let's see, let's hear it. We have another question in the chat, and it is, can you talk a little bit more about the idea that it will take 2 years to recover, to at least be where we were in January 2020? How are you continuing to assess the issue?
Yeah, and that's something that kind of the experts are saying or telling us. So we're checking it, and we look at this data in a number of ways. So we are, one, first and foremost, talking to our agency partners that I keep referencing, so kind of seeing what they're seeing on the ground. But someone asked her a little earlier about Feeding America. One of the great things about Feeding America is they also collect data and do analysis for us in our region and across the country. So on an annual basis, but also on a monthly basis, we're providing data to show them what we're seeing. And they're working directly with analysts they've also had nonprofit, they've also had pro bono support from national consulting firms that have been helping them. So we're watching what's happening economically. I'm thinking anybody, if you're reading the papers, if you're watching the TV news, you're understanding that people are saying the same thing. So we're just keeping an eye on that so that we can be prepared to be in this for the long haul. So that's what the data is showing us right now, but we'll continue to monitor that too.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice for individuals who, you know, who are just living their lives in terms of dealing with possible hunger situation with a friend, a neighbor? Do you ask? Do you just drop food off on their front porch? What's the best way to handle? Do you point them toward the nearest food kitchen? What would you suggest?
So I'll tell what I personally did for me, right? When I experienced that, what I've done is I let people know where they can find resources. So, you know, you can call, there's a Why Hunger hotline. It's 1-800-5-HUNGRY. There's also a website. You can visit our website for resources about how to find food. So I think letting people know, here are the places. You can, with the Why Hunger phone number, you can actually text and get information. You can call and a person actually walks you through what resources you need. And sometimes that's not just food, it's other services as well. So I direct people to those resources. You can find out where those distributions are as you hear about them, pass them on. One of the cool things that my mom does, which I love, is that she will send out a group text with information. So if she knows there's a distribution coming up. And so she does that to say, I'm not telling you specifically, Jenice, that you need this, but I'm just saying this so you have it. Right. So I think there are other ways of getting information to people and letting them know about resources. So I'd encourage you to just let people know, direct them to what those resources are.
That's really good advice. And it's easy if you are on social media, you can put up a post.
That's right. That's exactly right. Using social media to do that is a great way of letting people know.
Okay, here's another question on the chat. Going back to partners and supporters, have local supermarkets been helpful in the distribution of food? In other words, are they not throwing food away?
So love that question. So we started as a food rescue organization. Our kind of founding story is that that our founder, Pamela Lawler, had her Subaru and realized that there was all this food going to waste here in the region across the country. And if you took, I think, like maybe a quarter of that and kind of gave that to people who were hungry, you could feed people, right? And so that's part of how we were founded. And so food rescue has been a part of who we are. So here's the other reality that under COVID and over time, people, either grocery stores have gotten more efficient, but we've also know what's happened with grocery stores during COVID. So there's been less waste or less excess food for them to distribute. That said, we have incredible partners in small and large grocery stores. So there are the large grocery store chains, Acme and Giant are two that come to mind that have been incredibly generous and help us in really big and systematic ways. Everything from having point of sale where individuals can donate to making sure that that we have access to any excess food that they have that's safe that we could use. Similarly with restaurants, again, under COVID, that has decreased a bit, but definitely that food rescue is a part of what we do. Another thing is that I mentioned that we've always been looking for skilled volunteers and skilled experts. We have a phenomenal food advisory council. So folks at every aspect of kind of the food supply chain that on a quarterly basis are advising our people in our food supply to say, here are the trends we're seeing, here's where you can access cheap, free, discounted food, particularly on the produce side. And so we have definitely had partners, large and small, in the supermarket industry who've been great help for us.
Well, that's great to hear. Is there a partnership between Philabundance and Project Home to help feed the homeless?
That's a great question. Project Home is near and dear to my heart. I had served on the board of Project Home on and off for literally a decade and stay very connected to them. So we partner with them in a few different ways. We actually, through our Philabundance Community Kitchen, I talked about the culinary arts training side. We also have a commissary kitchen where we do meal production. So originally the idea of that was that we were going to be a catering operation. Catering has kind of slowed down under COVID, as people know, but we also have been doing thousands of meals a week for institutions and entities. So we provide those meals for shelters for people experiencing homelessness. We provide meals for the Hub of Hope that folks have probably heard, that's right there in suburban station, a partnership with the city of Philadelphia and Project Home. So we partnered with them there. We've also partnered with them on advocacy. So I'd encourage you to look back. Back in October, Sister Mary Scullion and I put an op-ed out that said, here's what our organizations are doing. Our volunteers are great, our board members are great, our staff are great. We're doing what we can to address food insecurity, hunger, and housing insecurity, but we can't do it alone. We need government to step up. And so we're partnering with Project Home in terms of advocacy as well.
That's great. They do such great work.
They do. They do.
What supports are there for families with non-traditional food requests, such as halal or vegetarian options?
Oh, I love that question as well.
I do.
Yeah, and in terms of that's a priority of ours. Also, culturally appropriate foods, and that's something that we've definitely made a priority of for our team as well. So we're making sure that we're partnering with some of our agencies that are better at that. They know that they're serving unique, specific populations, and they've asked us specifically for food to serve people who are halal or who are Asian, the Asian American community, Indian American community, et cetera. So we are partnering with them, and we will do purchasing specifically to meet the needs of those communities as well.
Really?
Yeah, we definitely will. We have, I was thinking, we visited recently the Jewish Relief Agency up in the Northeast. So that's an agency, despite its name, it serves all people, all religions, and all backgrounds, but they specifically serve food, ensure that the food they serve is kosher. And so one of the things we make sure that we do is we're able to purchase food that they're able to distribute as well. So it definitely is something we're mindful of. And at this moment, it's definitely something that we've set as a priority for ourselves.
Make sure that the food, they're not just giving out food willy-nilly, but it's getting, like, if you're a vegetarian, to give more vegetable options.
Absolutely. And I should say, and I think the name of the organization, there's a nonprofit in Montgomery County, I think it's called Garden of Health. And they really started, I love this story. This is an individual who started this, founded this organization because she herself had some specific dietary needs, and her family did. And so her pantry is primarily, it's gluten-free, it's vegetarian, it's vegan, it's organic. And so we definitely are partnering with folks to make sure that we're meeting people's needs.
That's great. So is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you think might be important to talk about for those listening, and then for people to know about Philabundance and what it's up against in these months ahead?
You know, I want to share with people, like, really gratitude. You know, it is an honor for me, but really for all of us to be able to do this work. It is so critically important right now. And I'm grateful, we're grateful to have been entrusted with this work, and we're grateful that people are investing in us in this way. You know, encourage you to learn more about the work that we do. We encourage you to think about ways that you can support if you can. We've actually had to limit, early on, we limited kind of food drives, right? And it's kind of a little bit harder to do that. We do still accept food. You can visit our website to see how we're accepting food, but we'd encourage people to get involved in any way that they can. I want to do a special shout out. One of the things that's really cool, I guess I didn't mention, is the unique ways that people support us, which is incredible. There's this, you guys have heard of it, Camp Out, right? WMMR, Stephen Preston, or Preston and Steve, for 20 years, they've been running the largest single food drive in the country for us. And they bring together everyday people and big companies to do that work. There also is right now getting lots of attention, this really cool pizza guy. So there's this grad student,
yes,
right? Do you love this?
We heard about that, yes.
Apparently he was on Ellen this week. And so Ellen has given some funding from that goes to us too. So people are being really creative. And so just grateful that people are so supportive. And I guess if I ask anybody anything, it's like what we do with our work. I ask you to continue to think about and put first the people we serve. That's like what we put first, kind of why we do this work. It is what gives us energy. And so just know that if you're investing in us, you're really investing in those everyday folks that are having, unfortunately, often due to no cause of their own, are really
tough.
That's
the hard part. Yeah, and that's the really hard part. People through no fault of their own, people who otherwise were working and been laid off because of the coronavirus, or just whatever. It's just really hard. I mean, whenever I come up across those stories in the paper, my heart aches, and I always wish I could give them money, and which we can't do. But I know I can give it to Philabundance. I definitely could. You know, you mentioned something. Your limited food drives. You said I didn't quite catch what you were talking about.
Yeah, so early on in COVID, we shut down food drives. Remember, we were all figuring out what was safe and what wasn't safe. So we stopped food drives, and then just in time for Hunger Action Month, which is September, we started those up again. And so you can visit our website on certain days. We do accept food at our Berks warehouse, so encourage you to drop that off. You can visit our website to see the kind of priority foods that we're always looking for: tuna, fish, peanut butter, those kinds of things. So encourage you to visit those sites, visit our website, learn about that, and do a food drive for us. We also, very cool, we're doing virtual food drives. So you and your friends, or maybe for your birthday or something, you want to do a virtual food drive. So people can go to a website and say, in honor of Jenice, and I'm going to purchase X amount of cans of tuna fish or jars of tomato sauce. And then that converts to dollars, and we're able to get the funding for our food fund. So lots of creative ways that people can support our work right now, even if it's not a literal food drive.
I love that idea. I got a birthday coming up in May, and I will do that. What a great way to celebrate. Instead of doing stuff for me, do something to help someone else. Do something to help someone else. I heard a local pastor say that once. He said, when you go grocery shopping, buy something for someone else too, if you can. Don't just shop for yourself. So thank you so much for what you're doing. I think that's all the questions I have. And let me see if there's anything else in the chat that I might have overlooked. If anyone else has questions, now's a good time to get them in. We're coming up on, we've got about 7 minutes left before we're finished. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I do want to, once again, in front of this group, and I know we have a lot of our partners and supporters and even some board members on the call, talked about the people we serve and how we put them first. I've talked about the agency partners. I've mentioned the staff. We have such an incredible team here. They're a team who, over a couple of days, were able to host the president. So that was incredible.
How about
that, right? But just really dedicated workers. And I'm so grateful and honored to get a chance to lead them. They bring their heart to work every day, virtually or in person. Everybody from, kind of all of our drivers, our warehouse workers, our development staff, our HR team, everybody really does get why we're here and put their hearts into it. And so know that when you're supporting Philabundance, you're supporting the people we serve, but you also are really empowering this incredible group of people who I promise you are here because they care and they're committed to driving hunger from our communities today and ultimately ending hunger for good.
Here's a comment from one of our viewers, and who says, "It is unconscionable that people in this country go hungry. What needs to happen at the federal level to make sure that everyone is fed?"
No, absolutely. Love that you said that. Love that you said that. And kind of sign up for one of our newsletters, and we do send out advocacy notices and encourage people to help us advocate for more support for people. And so one of the ways is SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or what we used to call food stamps. And there has been the new president has just signed an executive order to increase the amount that people would have for that. SNAP is great because think about this. We talked about dignity. We talked about kind of the types of food and culturally appropriate foods. What you're doing is basically putting money in the pockets of everyday people and letting them choose what kind of food they're going to put on the table for their family, for their kids. And in addition to that, every dollar you spend ends up having the economic impact of like $1.70. So you're also then, supporting our local economy. So definitely, we're always encourage people to call for more SNAP or those kinds of benefits. Also during COVID at the state and federal level, where possible, we've asked for waivers. So particularly when it's unsafe for people to come, seniors to come and show an ID, when possible, let's just kind of limit all barriers just to make it easier for people to get food. So please join us in advocating for those kinds of increased supports at the federal level as well.
I wasn't sure what you're talking about in terms of the waivers. Like, what kind of waivers are you talking about?
Yeah, so one of the things that used to happen, and government was great about offering waivers, is say for there's a senior program where seniors on a monthly basis could get essentially a box of food. They get access to food. In the past, pre-COVID, they would have to come themselves, right? Not even necessarily send a representative, come themselves, show an ID. Now, under COVID, when we realized that we couldn't have seniors coming out as much, that shifted to delivery. And so those kind of requirements were waived. And so what I think we can learn, there's a lot we can learn from COVID and how we were distributing food. So, once we get through this, and we will get through this, when we're thinking about how we're serving seniors, do we need to have the same kind of ID requirements, or what does that really look like? Do we need to still have it where seniors are in fact coming? Now, there's a benefit for people coming out and gathering, and we definitely want to encourage that, but maybe we can make it a little bit easier for folks to do more home deliveries of food and meals. So that's actually something we're looking at instituting and institutionalizing for us now. But let's see what we can do to limit barriers to make it a little bit easier for people to access the charitable food network, particularly under COVID.
Okay, let's see. All right. I think it's time for us to wrap up. I got a message from Laura here saying she's going to email everyone else when this is all over, do a little bit of housekeeping. This has been a pleasure to talk to you, Loree. You got a great, you are well prepared for this. And any help you need from me, I hope you'll ask.
I definitely will. And thank you again so much. I really do get inspiration. I learned so much from what you're writing. You definitely are an advocate in your columns, and I appreciate the way you really are making the world a better place through your advocacy and through your columns. And thank you so much for taking this on today. I really appreciate it. We appreciate it at Philabundance.
And thank you for what you do and for Philadelphia. Philadelphia would be a much worse off were it not for the work that Philabundance and you are doing. So thank you.